and welcome to Seeking Heaven, the Near-Death Experience, and Other Phenomena. I'm glad you're here today. I'm your host, Tamara Caulder Richardson, a 6-time near-death experiencer, evidential medium, and channeler, and starseed, for those of you that want to know about that. So I want to thank you for being here, and please subscribe, click the bell, get all the episodes, watch past episodes, new episodes twice a week, tell your friends, make comments, and check out my Ascension School, Academy of Divine Wisdom.com for classes, events, webinars, and so forth. And if you sign up for the newsletter, you get a free Christ-like meditation by me, 30 minutes. It's very good. I'm bringing that same light I had in my NDE. So you might get some high, you get a little God high on that. So sign up for it. And I'm going to jump right in about our guest today because it's exciting. If you haven't seen our guest, Michael Flem, he has 2 other episodes on Atlantis that phenomenal. And today we're going to talk about what happened. What was the demise of Atlantis? Apparently, as Michael said in the second episode, there were 3 versions of Atlantis. What does that mean? I mean, they all existed, but there were key moments, like for example, American or UK or whatever, history in this world. There are stages of things. So he's going to talk about that and what we can learn from it. But do be sure to see the 2 before, which is on why he wrote the book, what he learned that was surprising, and as well as the channeled information on Atlantis is fascinating. So I'm going to bring you in so we can start talking more about Atlantis. I love this topic. Michael, welcome back.
Hey, nice to see you again.
All right, so let's jump in it. So go back to the point that you're telling us about the 3 that apparently that there was a history of Atlantis by sections of things that happened. And
Sure.
And if you can go a little bit more detailed, like if you can,
Absolutely.
like in this section, you were describing some of it, like the mastodons and the thing. Okay, that was crazy. But watch the second one. But what are things that we can visualize or think of, or kind of help us visually? People are visual. Kind of visually walk us through what are these phases like, or what was been told by Oliver, Steiner, or Cayce.
Sure. Well, one of the first ones, Cayce describes, 3 destructions and other disturbances. He calls them breakups. Sometimes he describes them. But the first one is very interesting. And he says, look, this one happened in the year, specifically 50,722 BC. Okay. And he said at that time, people had achieved fairly high level of civilization in Atlantis, which at that time, he says, was a continent that stretched from the Gulf of Mexico to the coast of Spain almost. So this was a huge continental landmass, It was not an island at that time. And he said all along this island were roaming what he called the Animal Menace, which, again, if you go back in the zoological record, you will find that this is the time of saber-toothed tigers, mastodons, all these animals that lived in that region of North America. And as I mentioned, would have been living on that island had it existed, or whatever land existed hundreds of kilometers off the coast of, say, North Carolina, because that used to be dry land at this time, the continental shelf. And so Cayce says the people of the world got together in these basically zeppelins, balloons that were built out of the skins of animals that were connected to a crystal that impelled them, he described it. They all met and they said, what's the best way to deal with these giant animals that are roaming all over our cities and like menacing us? Okay. And so they decided, Cayce said, to use what he called the death ray, which, again, he said this before Star Wars.
Laser.
And he said, and I've read this many times, and it's not clear if it came from the stratosphere or was like HARP or something and it bounced off the stratosphere. But he says this word stratosphere, he says basically a directed energy weapon was fired into the stratosphere or from the stratosphere into volcanic lava flows to try to destroy the food supply of these animals. Now, it's interesting because mainstream scientific Journal of Quaternary Studies, says there is an unexplained major megafaunal extinction of animal life around 50,000 BC, which we think is due to hunting, but we really don't have a good answer. So
Okay.
again, it's, to me, that's a statistically
Questionable.
interesting point. Doesn't prove it, but it's interesting. He said that 50,722, and this article said around 50,000 BC, not 40, not 30. And as time goes on,
They starved them out because they couldn't kill them all.
right. And so he says that this was like went out of control though, and the Earth's crust became disturbed and the tectonic plate shifted and it broke up this continent into 5 big islands. And he says it was like that until 28,000 BC, which I'll leave that one because that's out of a movie how that one gets blown up. That one definitely is worth reading the book for. It's a cautionary tale for anybody, any nuclear engineer around today. And then the final one would be interesting, just like Plato. Cayce gives the description of, like, I guess from a Christian perspective, he's like, you have turned your face away from me and now you will face judgment. That's what Cayce
Well,
said.
maybe well, I mean, that's probably not too far off.
And so
Right.
it's interesting because the final destruction to me seems like the one most people think is the comet or similar, object that struck the Earth at that time. And so maybe that's like what Cayce and Plato were both describing. In fact, in Plato's account, the Egyptian priest describes the myth of Phaeton, who many people have interpreted as a planet that used to be there that's no longer there, or just a comet falling to Earth. I mean, that's specifically described in Plato's account of the Egyptian priest telling Solon, like, every once in a while things fall out of the sky and erase history. That's how that dialogue begins. And he says you have to begin again like little children. And that's why you come to Egypt, as we know the real history of humanity, and you Greeks are like little kids that you got to learn every time because you keep records in books and things like this, and we write them in, pyramids and things like this. So it's interesting that
Right.
the final account to me was probably the one that was natural, but the first two, according to Cayce, were human created purely through a misapplication of technology.
So let me ask you this. I have visions of Atlantis. I have one where it's like an earthquake, and then
Mhm.
one that it's got volcanic, it's burning. Okay, there's fires, and then I have one that it implodes because of the whole struggle of dark and light kind of situation. You had the people that were the oracles or the seers or the Jedis, and then you
Sure,
had the others that wanted to control it for gain and to
sure.
control people for money, kind of like they do now, right? And
And
so it
when
was a
you said,
philosophical thing, and it imploded because they took the crystals that we powered the city and it imploded and it flooded. It was awful.
that's really weird that you use that word
It
imploded,
imploded.
because it's interesting because in Barbara Hand Clow's account, which I do include in the book, um, she wrote a book called the Atlantis Signet, and it's
Oh,
allegedly her past life in one iteration of Atlantis. And she says that similar, but in her case, it was a extraterrestrial king in 23,000 BC, I think is her timeline. And he had decided to re-imprint humanity with basically a different narrative of their past, because it was, in her explanation, it was like these were colonizers that were going around the planets trying to,
that's correct.
like, standardize and harmonize the planets, and they're like, we can't have these earth people rebelling. And so in her version,
Yeah. They're
they
still
do
doing
that.
that. Go
Well,
ahead.
and in her version, they do that. And she says it catastrophically backfires, and one portion of that civilization just implodes. Like, I mean,
I see it going down and up and then flooding and people being confused. But that one to me was very spiritual because it was like two different philosophies that collided. is what I
Sure.
see. And kind of like we are now. So we need to learn from that. We don't need to blow up our
Yeah.
planet. We need to love each other and just work it out. And so,
Yeah.
but yeah, that was and here's the thing. When you move away, in my opinion, when you move away and let's put it this way, people that are more self, I'm not saying not taking care of yourself and loving yourself and going after your dreams. That's not what I'm talking about. But people that are obsessive and don't care about others, there's balance there. Then
Sure.
we're in this together. When you move away to like, who cares about other people? There's a coldness in your heart. And then
Right.
then that separation creates the duality, because in fact we all know each other and we love each other, and that's a lie. So there's a
And
lot that we can learn from that, because we had to start over. We don't even have the technology we had back then.
right. And it's good to talk about that because, the book, I tried to show to the best of my ability, like
You did.
how dark did it get in this culture. And I mean, there are some scenes that are, I mean, horrifying and that were channeled, of just absolute, you could read that if you want, but that's allegedly what really did happen to some of these people, according to Cayce and Oliver. And it's like, it's so interesting to see like these same, temples in one case that used to be this special place of learning and communicating with
Wisdom
other,
schools. I know.
yeah, converted into
Yeah.
basically these human sacrifice pits and just this horrific
That's
things
what
that just unbelievably, debaucherous, unspeakable acts taking place
Right.
in these
Correct.
things, and at the final stages of this culture, and in one case, there's a woman who, it's one of my favorites. She's a Catholic schoolgirl who's, I think, 20 years old, and she comes to Cayce, and I would like a past life reading, Mr. Cayce.
Oh boy.
And he says, well, at the end of Atlantis, around 11,000 years ago, young lady, you were putting people through a sacrificial fire, and then you were taking the mountain of ashes of all these people, and you poured them basically in those circular rivers of the capital of Atlantis, and you made other people drink that water.
Okay, so can I say something here, because we're all learning. This is really cogniting for me. So what I remember when I taught at Edgar Cayce Center in Mediumship in 2018, I was at lunch at a sandwich shop, at the Edgar Cayce sandwich shop. It's just a little place, but I was so excited. I was at the Edgar Cayce sandwich shop at
Yeah.
the deli, and I just started remembering, all this stuff and just talking up a storm like I'd never talked about it before. I have no idea. And everybody, but I didn't realize that people there were like past people from Atlantean and written books on this. I didn't know that. So, so one of the things that I saw is that I knew Cayce, but we went to Egypt afterwards. But what happened is we still brought the problems. You know how in life
Exactly.
you need to work your problems out, because guess what? Next life, you're still working it out. So what
Exactly.
happened is there were people that I'm just going to use my words, and they may not be the right words, but
Sure.
they may be a different word for you, but we would use the love of the divine source, God, whatever you want to call it. And we worked through that and had balance to everyone. And we give and we take, like you do in relationships, right? With our families or spouses, is what you do. But there was another group that wanted to take to the point it became dark. And we had abilities that you might want to call alchemy, but they used it for, I'm just, again, let's don't get hung up on Tamara's words, but it felt like black magic. I'm just going to say like from the Fallen Angels book of Enoch, but dark magic that went into Egypt. And they even used angel Enochian dark magic. Is very dangerous. It's very, very bad. And a lot of people don't know they're doing it.
I believe it. And
so there's two schools.
Well, and it's very weird because that's exactly what Edgar Cayce said. He said that.
Are you serious? Really?
Yeah, that's literally what he said. He said that the survivors went to 3 different places on Earth mainly. And one of them was the Giza Plateau in 10,500 BC. And what they did was exactly what you said. There was a huge struggle there for, are we going to do this again? and that's a really weird time period because he never finishes that story. He describes the pyramids and this and that, but that's a kind of black hole going up 6,000-7,000 more years where he never really finished that part of the story, and I've read almost every Edgar Cayce reading on Egypt, and it's like there's a lot of stuff to that that's crazy, really crazy.
Okay, so I've got some homework for you. You're like, what? Okay,
Sure.
so okay, I want you to find out for us.
Mhm.
So because I'm trying to put the pieces together too. So after Egypt, I saw us go there and we're still fighting that battle that we did there. So it's not
Right.
good. So you have people that had natural abilities that were good and
Mhm.
some were using it for really horrible stuff like drinking the ashes kind of thing. And
Yeah.
that is still being played out now because some of the star seeds are remembering you want to, you know,
Sure.
you don't want to
Sure.
go back to old habits.
No.
So what I see it's going to is that in Egypt, where I see the trail and it's the Sumerians about the DNA, the aliens, and then
Sure.
it's going into honestly the book of Enoch, the fallen angels. They were deities. There was more than
Mm.
one in the Bible. Gods, people
Exactly.
chariot of the gods. I know people don't want
Right.
to hear this. Look, that's why they keep saying in the Bible, you were raised in Catholic school, the Hebrew God, notice they said that a lot, Hebrew God, is
Right.
because there were more than one God, there were deities. And so
Well,
some of
yeah. Doesn't it say, of course, let's make them in our image?
yeah, it's creepy if you really look
Like,
at it.
what? What are you talking about?
What are you saying here?
Who's
And then
right?
there's different images, okay? So then you look at the Egyptians with the jackal and the dog
Right.
people, or you
Sure.
look that
Sure.
some of that's not human, okay?
No,
Or
and
snake people.
Cayce even goes into that where he doesn't, he does mention extraterrestrials. It's very weird that he talked about extraterrestrials in the 20s in these readings.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, he was
And
so ahead of his time.
yeah, I mean, like before, I mean, people didn't even really know about Roswell really until the 70s, unless you lived in Roswell, New Mexico, and you
Mhm.
got the newspaper that day. The average American didn't even really
Right.
think about this. So for Cayce in 1926, I think one reading I cite where he's giving a life reading and he tells this woman, oh, you used to live in the Mayan civilization after Atlantis, and you were there when there was the understanding that the people from the outer worlds, the other spheres, were visiting. And it's like,
Yeah,
what?
they visited them. Yeah, that's what the
Right.
pyramids were for. They were energy centers, but they did that sacrifice thing. I remember being sacrificed in a volcano, and everybody's real excited
Wow.
about like you've been chosen, and I was like, 11 years old or 12, and I'm like, this is
Wow.
horrible. And going down a chute, they did a ceremonial chute, and I went right down in the middle. And I mean,
Jeez.
I couldn't even go into a Mayan museum, and I think there's one in Chicago. And I went in, and
Hmm.
I started having literally this is so
Wow.
unlike my personality. I'm very pretty, I'm kind of like, but I'm really calm. I don't get, I have pretty high confront. I
Sure.
walked in with all this stuff with the Mayan and all
Wow.
the sacrifice. It was a museum. The
Right.
real stuff. I literally, I started passing out and I started like being
Wow.
terrified. I said, I cannot go in here.
Well, and it's interesting because I think, again, I don't want to give too much away because it's cool to see it how it evolves in the book, but
It is.
there's
It's
a
really
definite
cool.
connection, I think, between the Aztec human sacrifice cult and the
Yeah.
final days that Frederick Oliver is describing in Atlantis.
Okay, that's what I was gonna ask you. So you see it
Yeah.
too.
Oh, absolutely. And
Nobody likes to talk about that, but it was part of history.
yeah, and it's like, where do the Aztecs come from? Well, according to their myths, they come from Aztlan.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's like,
They're
and you
partial
know,
ET hybrids. Yeah.
yeah, and it's like, I just think like it's really just this same battle, that plays out in.
Still,
I
right
mean,
now, have you
yeah,
noticed
to
that?
this
It's the
day, to
same
this
one.
day.
Including we're gonna add on to the Atlantis, Tamara's book of Enoch, because if you really look at it, because it's in different cultures. And just like the Jewish culture, this
Right.
story about the fallen angels. But if you follow, there's more to it. It goes
Hmm.
into this DNA and the ET thing in the battle, and they call them fallen angels, but other people call them. The fact is, they were deities having this battle, and
Hmm.
and it's described in some of the stuff you're saying, and it's kind of the same weird stuff that's going on now for control, for aggression, and control people's free will,
Right.
and mind control,
Well, and
and
look
all
at
this.
exactly. Look, Barbara Hand Clow. I mean, that book was written in 1992, and she said at my time there were 5 islands. So that's why I put it at that second area, 28 to 25,000. She says 23. And she says these are their names. One of them was named Atlantis. Then another one was named Poseid. Another one was named this. And she said Atlantis was the headquarters of the, quote, New World Order. She said that in 1992, 2 years after George Bush's New World Order speech, when really like nobody except for Bill Cooper or somebody is talking about that. So I thought that was interesting. And that they destroyed it as they were trying to reset human consciousness, which is
which was hello. And if you look at like Atlantis, I recall the similar 3 triangles, and I also at Egypt, right? So if you like a house, if you move to another city, chances are you're going to buy one similar. So they put the pyramids also in Egypt, but if you look at the dollar bill, what does it have on it? The pyramid. And so it's like, it's the same. It's ridiculous. People are literally creatures of habits. We need to remember so we can self-correct, but we're playing this crazy game, and it's not one that anyone wins.
No.
Not the duality one. We don't win this way.
No, and I think just even like a study of the 20th century will show you that. And then when you really go further back, you're like, wait a minute, like this has been even way worse than the technology of the 20th century, where we like are changing in some versions, like you're changing the axial rotation of the Earth for thousands of years. Like you're catastrophically affecting the Earth instead of just, the horrors of a nuclear bomb or EMP, which are bad, but it's like, things that these people were doing, according to some of these readings, it's like you're almost destroying the physical axis of the planet, and so that's really terrifying. Like I don't even really want to think about that being possible.
Yeah, but you live forever, so it's like tomato. I mean, and the thing is, I think that when we were going back to kind of pull it back, if you didn't see it, watch the first and second one. But we talked about the holographic universe, and what does that mean? Whatever we project, like we think everything's gloom and doom. Well, guess what? We're going to get more of. If we go, you know what? I'm deciding I'm not playing that game of destruction. I'm done with that. I'm going to have a life of love and learning and assistance and service and laughter. And I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that game anymore. And more of us that say that, we literally change the consciousness collectively with our intent in the holographic universe. So our timelines is still in the flux of changing. And I think that also because we're creation, we're part of creation, we are creation, we can't die, that it's somehow affecting the planet, Mother Gaia, and so it's we have a lot more control than we realize, and we should know these nefarious sources because we've dealt with this before, and that's why everybody gets all jacked up and upset because they remember whether it's Atlantis or different times they've dealt with this, but we can it's just like a bully on the schoolyard and someone wants to pick a fight. You can say, no, I'm not going to, I'm just going to leave. No, I'm not doing this.
Not engaging with that.
I'm not going to engage with that. Same thing when you have a troll that wants to say yucky stuff. You're like, if you have a legitimate question or comment, but if you're just going to want to start a fight, I really don't want to do that. So, because there has to be a better way, because Atlantis did succeed and flourish for a long time.
Oh, and that's the thing. I think is I'd like to actually like kind of close on that, because I think people focus so much on the end, but it's like, I mean, think how long has the United States been around? 260 years, not even. And it's like, how many of those years were incredible? So if any of these things were true, so even like 1,000 years of progress, it's like, could you imagine that? That would be incredible, and what we just focus on, and then sank into. It's like, yeah, but think about the good times. I mean, my God, that would have been something that like we've never even dreamed of. So
That's
I
true.
think that's like a good point that you make. Like instead of focusing on the destruction of Atlantis, it's like, what
Mhm.
about the good time? Like that's a book you should write, the Atlantis, the good times. You know,
Let the
I
good
remember
times roll.
yeah,
Well,
like why is it always like the final days? It's like maybe that's a reflection of how screwed up we are today. Like we're just
I
this
agree.
depressed, hopeless society. And it's like, well, then you're gonna get, like you said, you're gonna get what you
You're
wish
gonna get
for.
more.
Like,
You're gonna get more of that, and why is some of this stuff, this information we're talking about, would be a surprise to anyone? I mean, quite honestly, hello. I mean, if you're alive, as here, you've been alive at some point at another time period. This should not be a surprise. We just need to say, look,
yeah,
we don't want to play that game. We don't want to judge our brother and sister. If you're Hindu, Christian, this
yeah,
atheist, who cares?
whatever.
You're a human. You'll find out. Have
Yeah,
six near-death
right.
experiences. You'll figure it out.
There you
But
go.
the thing is, it's not about that. We all certainly have family members that are different than us, and we still find a way to love them. So
Absolutely.
we've got to work on this together because it does affect the land. But I think that's why they created that. What is it? Atlantis, the resort, because it
Oh
looks
yeah,
like
you've been there.
paradise, the good
That's actually,
times.
I've been there many times as a kid. It's
Me
funny you
too.
said that.
It
It's
was
great.
good. It was
It's a
really good.
great place. It's a fun
You know
place.
what? I really was hoping parts of it, like when did you go in the aquarium part?
Of course.
Oh my God, I loved it. But there were certain parts that felt real, and I just wish there was nobody there but me.
I
Uh,
know. You got to go
uh,
at night. You got to go at night into the aquarium. Sometimes you can get in there late, and it's incredible. And it did feel
spiritual.
like I've been here before, but it wasn't a hotel. Like, you know
Y-
what I
y-
mean?
Yeah,
It's
and
pretty
even when
weird.
you walk in the lobby of the hotel, not, I mean, parts of it, or certain sections of it, I felt it, and it made me homesick. But the aquarium
Interesting.
is what got me
Oh, it's a
because
beautiful aquarium.
oh, the aquarium is one of the best in the world, and that's, again, we should be in synchronicity,
Sure.
and respect to the animal world,
That's right.
including aquatics. And I think that they used to have that harmony. And if you look, to me, if you look at the sea, the
Right.
ocean, it's so vast and expansive. It's like space,
It
uh,
is
and they
another
seem to
dimension.
have managed it. It's another dimension, and they had balance. And I think,
Right.
I want to give you the last words on what you think, what's needed. I feel like it's a balance that they have maintained that we need to somehow go back to. But what do you feel after looking at this, that the good times versus everybody went off the rails,
Yeah.
things got bad
I
before all
always,
that happened.
I think it's just like, I've listened to people sometimes that really don't like that duality, and they're just like, look, everything just is, and it's just
It's all
you're
good.
never, yeah, it's just like those people are learning their lesson, you're learning yours, and you need them, and I
It's
don't know.
good.
I mean, it's like,
It's hard to do, but it's good. It's
yeah,
good. It's
because
healthy.
if you're always looking for like when are we gonna beat the bad guys, it's like never,
You're going to
never.
lose too. But you know what?
Yeah, like
Let me tell
you
you what
win, you
happened.
lose, they win. Like they gotta
No,
face their own
okay. We're in
karma,
this ship. It's called Planet Earth. It's a little ship.
whatever.
If you
Yeah.
sink the ship, you're going to sink yourself too. So,
Yeah, like I would say, like the only thing that it's like should God help us it ever happens again is like if you were to physically destroy planet Earth, like
uh,
literally destroy the Earth, it's like okay, that's a major violation probably of like
major universal
yeah.
violation of the
But
Galactic
everything else,
Federation.
like the battles in Egypt, the battles in the first iteration of Atlantis, the battles in ancient Rome, it's like hey, while those were going on, people in another part of the world were flourishing and just going like, oh, there they go again in Atlantis, like they're doing that again, you know?
Well, as a historian, and you've seen history go through phases and so forth,
Sure.
um, looking at
I've got
Atlantis.
about 3 minutes, by the way, until studio
Okay.
closes, but
Okay,
definitely.
great. So, looking at Atlantis and then looking at where we are now in humanity, what
Mhm.
do you think this world needs?
I'm not in a position to make that judgment. I think the best thing, people can do now is what you do, you know, like think about it. Just think about the past and what can you learn from people who are in similar situations, even if it's fictional. What can you
It's
learn
true.
from that story? What
You're
can you
right.
learn
It
from
doesn't
Star
matter.
Wars? What can you learn from Shakespeare? It doesn't have to be real. It's
That's
real
beautiful.
enough.
Yeah,
It's real
you're
enough.
absolutely right. You can learn. You don't have to experience things. You can learn through our past
Yeah.
and learn through others. And we're definitely learning through you. You have
Well,
been
that's
such a
nice.
joy and a light. And I hope that you come back. And we're even talking
Sure.
about doing a webinar on Atlantis. We haven't put it together yet, but I'm
Sure.
giving you a little teaser here. Stay tuned. And look, get Michael's book, Visions of Atlantis, and hold your book up again, and so
Yeah.
everybody can see it. And please get the
Uh,
book. It's just, if you want to know, this is like the go-to book. It has everything. And thank you so much for everything you're doing. And we will
no,
stay in
thank you.
touch. Much love, Michael. Take
Hey,
care.
thank you. Appreciate your time.
Yours too. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Please subscribe, like, and make comments, and support this channel by becoming a member. Thank you for your continued support.